Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I think we are live here on StreamYard, and I don't know if there's a delay or not. I've not used this for a while. But either way, welcome back to another video chatting all things Manchester City. And today I got this wonderful young man alongside me from the City Ramble. Amos, how are you doing, my friend?
Glad to still be classified as young. I'm slowly but surely approaching unk status. I think I've got one last big payday in me, and
Oh, how old are
then
you?
25. But you know, it's a cutthroat world now. You know,
I'm
Hugo
40
Vian's
next
in.
month.
Golden
You're
oldie.
you're a
But
baby, mate. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, not to patronise you. You're in your
still
prime.
doing well. Still
You're in your
doing well.
prime still. You're approaching your prime. I think like my prime was about
Yeah,
35.
Saudi hasn't come knocking yet. We're fine.
Of course, Amos over at the City Ramble do a lot more YouTube stuff these days. So there is a link in the description to go and check them out. So many contributors over there, so much great content. So please go and check them out over there. Today, guys, I wanted to talk about the thing that I'm seeing all over Manchester City's online sphere, so to speak, is the debate around loans, because it's reasonably quiet in terms of incomings, other than James Trafford, of course. But it seems to be that the world is set on departures for Manchester City right now and exits. And of course, we've reached that time of the summer, as we get there every year, where a contentious young talent is about to go out on loan and everyone kicks off, sometimes myself included, maybe sometimes Amos included. And today's news is about Vitor Reis and Echeverri. Instead of just doing a sort of news report about what's happened with Vitor Reis, we'll summarise that. Of course, I thought it'd be better to have a discussion about the plans. And it's also on the day, and this is rest in peace, he's gone nowhere. Cheeky Brickenstein's moved. Rest in retirement, yeah. All right. Is he actually retiring? He's retiring.
I imagine that he's. You know what? Yeah, he's older than you think. I think
87 years old. That's great.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure he's retiring. I think that was the brief at the time.
Let me just double check. Is he retiring?
I hope so. Anyway, can't have him rocking up at
mate.
Barca or.
Apparently, he's not retiring. Sabbatical, maybe. I don't know. Actually, I don't think it's been. There was a report a year ago saying he's not retiring, but that was a year ago. I don't know. Either way, he's not young these days. But either way, an absolute legend. And
yeah,
he's handed over the keys to Hugo Vianna. 60 years old he is, by the way. So yeah, he's handed over the keys to Hugo Vianna, and I suspect that the approach will be different, and that's sort of a good bouncing up point for this whole discussion. So I'll start immediately with the news of Vitor Reis. It looks like he's going to join Girona. Literally just reading a tweet a few minutes ago saying that the move to Girona will be an easy one, which is, he says, let's have a look. Vitor Reis to Girona is a simple loan until June 30th, 2026. Defender will be the first of many City players to arrive. First of the Man City players to arrive, which implies more than one. Apparently Claudio Echeverri as well. City and his agents are trying to push Echeverri to go there. Echeverri wants to go somewhere else, maybe Roma, allegedly. But essentially, the loan carousel is kicking off. How do you feel about the news of Vitor Reis to Girona? And we'll get onto Echeverri in a minute, mate.
Yeah, I'm usually one of those people who can smell these CFG products, I guess, a mile off. When I think. Thinking back over the last couple of years, Perone, chief amongst them, it never felt like in a million years he was ever make it. So as good as that cameo against Bournemouth was, I think in the treble season. So yeah, I'm usually sort of immediately similar with Naipan at the moment. Immediately sort of disconnect emotionally because I just don't think these guys are ever going to make it. The Vitor Reis one's been a bit different because obviously he came in January, and again, this is a bit contradictory on my part, because a lot of the time transfer fees for me mean nothing. You can be 100 million quid, you can be 15 million quid. That isn't on the player. Quality is quality. You have to judge it with what you see in your eyes. I think when we've seen him, he's been decent. He's obviously got that ball playing ability. He's clearly got a lot to grow physically. Still, either early 20s or teenager, something like that. He's young basically, but it was promising. It was exciting, and he came in January. He didn't play a lot, but we saw him in a couple of cup games and then a little bit at the Club World Cup as well. And I'm thinking, you know what? There's a slot here, because you look at City's centre half makeup. I think as much as people are sort of picking at Ruben Diaz at the moment, I think City will start the season with Guardiola and Diaz as their main two, and then Kusanov is obviously lingering about. Whether or not the news about him having a City had to pay an extra bit of money if he made 10 appearances last year, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's the kind of thing that does happen in contracts, and maybe it is. fingers crossed we see him more. And then obviously Stones, Ake, and Akanji are at the opposite end of that scale, who are probably being phased out in the next year or two. So it felt for me like there's a proper gap there. And while I'm usually not fussed about this, there is just a tinge of disappointment, I think, because it would have been great to have had a fresh face in, almost contributing to this rebuild. Because I don't think you don't want a refurb. I think a lot of City fans want a rebuild, and as much as I do think, obviously, Akanji can be viable, I don't necessarily buy all of the disrespect he's been getting. I think he's a decent enough squad player. Obviously, John Stones on his day incredible, unfortunately not fit enough, and Nathan Ake serviceable with that left foot as well. There was part of me that was just a little bit disappointed by it. But I'm sure he'll go out on loan, he'll play plenty, and come back. I will say just finally, this to me, just off on the surface anyway, it feels a little bit different to the previous loans where they've been brought in with the view to loan. I feel like maybe had there been a little bit more movement, for example, Galatasaray, just hypothetically coming in with a bid for Akanji, and that slot opens up, maybe then we'd have seen Vitor Reis stick around. So it does feel a little bit different, but I can't deny. Just it would have been great to have seen that sort of bit of fresh blood in the team.
Yes, so many questions to bounce off on that, but I do think you're sort of right that I think Guardiola does see him. I do think Guardiola rates him. The implication towards the end there that Guardiola happily have him around the squad if Akanji wasn't there. I think that's probably true. I think the implication is of this potential loan is that Stones, Akanji, Ake, they are very hard to shift and they're probably going nowhere. And the immediate reply would be, well, those guys are injury prone, which is very true. So what happens if they all get injured again, which is also very true. I think the counter would be that you're probably going to trust now with RDL being able to play centre-back because you've got Nico O'Reilly and Aït-Nouri can play there. RDL's an additional centre-back. Kusanov doesn't seem to be injury prone. So you got two there. Diaz usually isn't either. So you got three who aren't definitely. And you probably hope one of the Kanji, Stones, and Ake are going to be available. So you've probably got enough there in terms of options of centre-backs. You'd expect 3 or 4 of them going to be fit at all times, even if 2 of them aren't, i.e. Ake and Stones. So I think we've got enough there. I agree. It sort of stings a little bit. I think he was obviously brought in because we had a crisis at the time. And I think the plan was maybe to use him this season a bit more, depending on departures. I think the quality of the clubs that have been linked to him, I saw if it was Leverkusen and Porto, wasn't it? I think I saw a link to Vitor Reis. Now, obviously, it's Girona, CFG club, but that's a La Liga side, and he goes there surely to be a starter. Speaks volumes of his ability. To be honest, of all the signings we made, Kusanov, Mamouche, Nico, blah, blah, etc., something about him, Vitor Reis, just jumps out to me. I think every time I watch him, I just see a guy who looks like a young John Stones, and John Stones has incredible ability, and it's a lazy sort of comparison.
When he got on the ball, he was, wasn't afraid to sort of just pass it. Not anyone, but a lot of players can pass sideways really well. He was breaking lines. He was looking to sort of step forward a bit.
He's leap as well. He looks elegantly gifted. It looks easy for him, and there's a real comfortability to his game where I just got a feeling he's going to evolve into a remarkable centre back, like really good. And I could be wrong there, but there's a feeling you can see why City spent the money. I do think the hand has been forced here by the size of the squad, which is frustrating because we do know essentially that the plan is to keep him, but we can't get rid of some people. So it's not the optimal situation. I think it's fair enough that, unless Guardiola's demanding this, but I don't really think Viana is signing these players to loan them out 6 months later. I think there's an element of, well, it's the best case scenario right now in terms of a solution given the homegrown situation. I think it is slightly different. I think the CFG thing is, you can smell it a mile off. Peroni was one, for example, and my mind's just blanks. But there's been so many, over the years. I think it is different. That does lead me on to, there's a lot of cynicism around and skepticism around the Loney situation because we see them and they never return. Loneys never return. Zinchenko that's a weird one. That was never planned. That was a sort of failed loan, and then it happened because he just happened to be in the squad and he became useful. That wasn't like he was fantastic over at PSV. In fact, he got dropped in the end. But that was it really. Loanies don't tend to return. So I guess the question I'm going to say is, I understand the cynicism around it. Is it fair to say that we don't really know Hugo Viana's plan to these loans, and that he will probably have some sort of impact on what is deemed successful as a loan and what the plan is going to be then? Essentially, is it fair to presume that these are loans and flips, to sell? Because I think there's an implication that it's different. I think the plans so far from Hugo Viana are slightly different, look, I don't know if it will be, but I think it is fair to say, unless you disagree, that Hugo's Viana plans aren't going to be the same as Cheeky Briggenstein's. And I think they're very obviously trying something at the moment. Like I think Nipan, Echeverri, Vitor Reis, they don't strike me as Peroni signings. They seem they feel a little bit different to that level. Am I not something, or am I talking nonsense?
No, I think that is definitely fair. The other elephant in this room is the fact that Guardiola's under contract until 2027.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I'd be astonished if we get another extension. It feels like given the messaging, the interviews from Pep, it does feel like we are very much in the sort of the final furlong here, and it's almost been a pattern throughout City's his time at City is if you are good enough, no matter what the age, you'll be in the squad. We saw Phil Foden as a 17-year-old, basically Rico Lewis, similar age. Though he almost sniffs out and picks out the youngsters early doors and gets them integrated, and I almost feel like he values 5 appearances a season, but training with at the time the likes of David Silva, Fernandinho, Kevin De Bruyne over playing 35 games for insert club here on loan. But I think the football the football landscape has certainly changed in terms of there are more competitive. The standard of football, I feel like across Europe, has gone up, so you can chuck someone in at Girona and they can have a successful time. Same in different leagues across Europe as well. But also on Hugo Viana, he was sort of somewhat famed for developing, or at least creating an environment where these young players developed at Sporting, and a lot of his transfers, successful transfers, were finding them early doors, bringing them in, giving them that experience in, I don't think it technically classifies as a top 5 European league, but I mean, some of the standard teams. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that is definitely something that he's got in his remit. And in a post-Pep Guardiola world, I think the next manager will probably be more inclined to use players that have been out on loan. Maybe they don't. Again, we're sort of trying to predict the future here. So I think that definitely for the here and now, that does play a part of it.
Someone said in the chat, why are we focusing on Viana here? I think we're focusing on Viana because Guardiola isn't making the transfer decisions. He may favour players, but Guardiola ultimately is not selling players. He's not the one who's signing players. He's not the one selling players. So that's the reason we're talking about Viana, because the plan in terms of squad management and building is not Pep's. Pep may favour certain players, but Viana's not signing Vitor Reis for Guardiola. He's signing him for Manchester City Football Club. I guarantee you, Guardiola never even heard of the young lad when we signed him. I'm not even being facetious there. He isn't. Guardiola's not saying sign Abdelkader Kusanov. He's never heard of him until he signed him, because he's gone, sure, you can bring him in. Guardiola's not asking his first Sverre of Nipan from Rosenborg. He might have known of him, but he's not asking for that.
That's not his job, is it? Basically, no, of course it's not. He might have a sort of a knowledge of the Champions League clubs or the Premier League clubs.
He's too busy. He's too busy to sit there looking for young talents like that. That's I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how these clubs work. Like a director of football is squad planning and all that kind of stuff. Guardiola might request Omar Mamouche because he sees some score goals. Even that, I'm not sure. He might have a favourite in when you see him tapping up Morgan Gibbs White, and that never happened. But he was definitely.
I think the Grealish one's a good example of that, because Pep was a fan, wasn't he, of Jack Grealish? He'd seen him firsthand, and that maybe plays a part of it. But Doku, on the other hand, was cheeky who brought him in.
It will be run past him. Of course it will be. And Guardiola go, what do you think of this play? I'm thinking of bringing him. Pep will go, yeah, sure. As long as I can still got my guys, yeah, sure, whatever. But I do think largely, these players are given to him because 18, 19-year-old players. Guardiola is not scouting the Argentinian league directly himself. That doesn't excuse Guardiola for ignoring them, no. But the reason we're talking about Viana is because the plans are Viana's. They're not Guardiola's. And we're talking about how City are going to plan, because we all know that the CFG route has been City sign these young players, they loan them out, they hope they become good, of course. I think the end goal, I think I need to sort of, I can't clarify it myself, but I think the best scenario, by the way, it's never that City sell them for 30 million after signing for 10. The best scenario is they sign them for 10 million and they become world stars and they come into the squad. That is always the best scenario there, because then you've got an 80 million pound player for 10 million pounds as opposed to 20 million pound profit. So City wanted, Peroni to become the best young midfielder in La Liga when he went on loan there, because they would have returned him. It turned out he was a good player, but not, a young Rodri. So that's why he didn't come back. But we've never had that. We've never had a player who's gone out on loan and been like the standout superstar in a league, And if they do, I'm sure they would have come back. So I think we always presume that we only loan them to sell them. I still don't believe that is the number one aim. I think the aim still is, You sign them young, hoping that they become superstars. If not, make a small profit in them, whatever. Do you agree with that? I mean, surely that is still the most optimal scenario, right?
Yeah, I think ideally, obviously, you've got to accept that a lot of these players are being signed early doors to flip them. That is City's business model, and that's how, in the world of PSR and FFP and whatnot, that City, with their position of privilege financially, let's accept it. They do have coffers that they can dip into, and they can sign these players and lure them over. And it is, for a young player as well, I think we get lost in the cutthroat business side of it. But signing for City, and even if you don't play for City, that's still, if you spend a year or two in the academy and you go out on loan, that's still a prestigious check next to your name.
I think we presume they're all happy, but not necessarily, are they?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think obviously these players that they signed, they'd love, like Zinchenko. On the off chance he comes back and he fits perfectly, and then weirdly you can even sell him for more money than you probably would have got trying to flip him if he hadn't come into the first team. I do think that after Guardiola leaves, probably in the next year or two, that we will start to see some of these young players come back in a little bit more, because you look across Europe and that's how people do it. That's how clubs do it. And I think City under Guardiola have been a special team, not only on the pitch in terms of what they win, but the way they operate off it is certainly unique. Not to say that every single player that goes out on loan has suddenly got a future in the first team, because obviously that wouldn't be sustainable. But I do think, in the situation of Vitor Reis, it'd have been great if he was in the squad. I think deep down they would have liked to. They can't shift to Kanji. Nathan Ake and John Stones are homegrown. I don't think that matters with Vitor Reis for the Premier League, but it might matter for the Champions League. I can't remember the specifics of the registration, but for whatever reason,
I think you're right.
They just can't. They can't find the wriggle room, which is a shame. But look, I'm sure he'll play well, and it gives us something to look out for.
So a lot of frustration as always in the chat, because everyone's frustrated all the time these days. No one ever listens, and they make strawman arguments in reply. Like, so you're obviously happy that Pep's running Walker into the ground? No, of course not, mate. Come on, no one's happy that Pep's running. We're talking them from the bigger picture, as opposed to, some people would like to talk about the symptom as opposed to, we're trying to look at the bigger picture as opposed to just moaning about the end result, if that makes sense. So, I mean, the simple question: should these guys be loaned out? Do you think Pep is wrong? I mean, it's hard to unpack that, because the simple answer is probably no. But I guess you have to consider that, maybe the plan, maybe they don't want to loan them out. Maybe they're trying to shift these players. Like, and we could turn around and go, "Oh, we just don't register Gundogan and Kovacic." You can't do that. You just you can, but you can't. You can't just not register Gundogan and Kovacic, because that is awful. Like, it's literally like it's.
And you won't be signing any players after that. I tell you,
no,
if you start doing that, clubs and agents are going to go. No.
You cannot sacrifice, league winners. So this is the thing we have to consider. It's very easy when you're on FIFA, you're on Football Manager or EAFC, to just ship these players out and release them. But these are people with families, and unfortunately, bad decisions may have been made. But do you think the plan? Do you think the plan was to have these guys around? Do you think the plan was to move on to more players? What do you think has happened, or has it gone exactly how Pep and Viana wanted?
Just quickly on that, I think obviously you spoke about the right back situation earlier today, but that's kind of the situation with the right back. I think personally it's City's weakest part of the squad, but I don't necessarily think they should be going out and splurging money for the sake of it, because what happens 3 years down the line when the player, isn't suited to the club, didn't necessarily meet expectations, it was a bit of a panic buy, you stuck with him, you can't move him on, and suddenly you can't go out and get the next best right back because you've already got one on the book. So I think that's worth mentioning. Honestly, I think that the situation with Claudio Echeverri and Vitor Reis is a little bit different. I do think there was maybe more of a pathway for Vitor Reis than there has been for Echeverri, even though weirdly we've probably seen Echeverri more minutes-wise. That might not be true, and it's only going to be like 10-15 minutes in it either way, because they've not played that much. But it always felt like from the messaging that Echeverri was more of that sort of buy to loan. Annoyingly, as he has looked wonderfully bright at times. Came on the FA Cup final, much to my angst at the time and confusion. But he looked really tidy. Then obviously got a great goal at the Club World Cup as well. But the messaging or the reports around him were always more like Pep's going to have a look at him. there's there's a space because of I think Kyle Walker left or something like that in the January window. He can be in and around the squad, blah blah. Vitor Reis, I do feel like in an ideal world, Hugo Viana would have liked to have moved on one of those. Well, I say one of them. You're probably looking at Manuel Akanji in terms of that centre back position where he would then slot into. So I mean, I don't think they'd gutted. I don't think they'd sort of sat there and devastated. We've got to keep Manuel Akanji because let's face it, as a squad player, he's experienced. He's just come off the back of surgery. Like a lot of players, he was playing silly amounts of minutes last season, and was running his body into the ground. And we've seen him in a couple of title-winning seasons. He can be useful. Don't get me wrong. He is partial to as the kids say, a bit of a bozo moment, and he might make a mistake. I think he personally fits perfectly in a fourth choice centre-back role. My only concern there would be Guardiola obviously trusts him highly because of his, first of all, versatility and what every season training. I don't know if City can get away with him playing, top 2, top 3 centre-back minutes this season, injuries dependent. But I do think he can be useful to the squad, which obviously, the question there is, do you value the experience of Akanji over the youthfulness of Vitor Reis? And maybe because they've not been able to move him on, I don't know. They've obviously gone with Akanji.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there, and ultimately, I think there's a comment on the chat there. I do think, and I agree with Tin Book 2 in the chat who said I think we are probably paying the price of not managing to move on some of the older guys in the last couple of years. And I think, which as Tim Book 2 said, it happens, but it sucks to live in it. And I think something we struggle with is the acceptance of the here and now is not always the reality. Like we have to accept that. They are aware that their probably plans might be 12 months later down the line because of, as you said, you cannot shift every player in a contract sometimes, and you bear in mind you can't just release a player. They have to agree to it. You can't just rip up a player's contract without paying them an awful lot of money. And it's, I don't think it's even legal just to sack a player and get rid of him. So they have to agree to it. And if John Jones goes, "Nah, I'm all right, mate. I just want to see out my last year of the contract," you either go to war with John Stone as a club legend, or you think, well, this is our fault. Sorry, Vitor, you're going on loan for a year, and we have to keep John Stones, who they love, who also solves the homegrown issue. And it's complicated. And yes, that means mistakes have been made. But essentially, sometimes you have to live and get in the muck that you created. And I think there is an element of that. I think mistakes have been made, which people have a right to be frustrated about. I think we are actually trying to undo the problems of our own making to an extent. I think we did go too long. I think everyone's accepted that we went too long. But there was too many players, to move on. And it could be that, the best play scenario right now is actually, with Stones and look, I think it's fair to say Stones and Ake and Akanji, 2 of the 3, if not all 3, will be gone in a year from now. They probably will move on, And at that point, you're going to bring Vitor Reis back because you have to. You're going to bring maybe Juma Bar back because you have to. So I think it's not ideal and it's frustrating. But I think there is mistakes. I think it's like some of those things where we can accept, there's a lot of anger online. We can accept that people make mistakes, but it's what you want then. Like, do you want blood from it? Do you think, essentially, do you accept that they've made mistakes? But the fact that they've signed these players proves that they're trying to solve them. And even if we can't always fix it right now, we might just have to accept that we've made a fucking cake and we're going to have to eat. There's an element of that in my. It's hard to move them all on, and I think moving on a few of them. I think I still maintain the plan to moving on that was quite clear. If you let De Bruyne go, you're planning on to let other players go too. He was the one that felt untouchable, and they got rid of him. So it is difficult. It is frustrating. I'm going to go full circle. Do you think we see these guys again in the Manchester City shirt? Vitor Reis and Echeverri. And Nipad I've not talked, by the way, because I think he's obviously going on loan, I think it was always. But these Vitor Reis and Echeverri, they've been around the team. They've been impressive in their little cameos. Do you think they come round to Manchester City again? Do you think that's the plan? Have people got a right to be cynical about this? There's so many things to unpack there.
Vitor Reis, yeah, I do. I think if I'm sort of... what's that old game show? £1 Million Drop or something like that, where they had to stick like certain monies on certain answers to questions. I think I'd go 80% Vitor Reis.
Never seen that.
It was. I think Davina McCall used to host it. It was decent. Yeah, I think definitely. I just because as you mentioned there, Ake, Stones, Akanji, the likelihood of all 3 being at City next season, as in
Kanji
26,
contract, by the way,
27.
is when's it? Is it 2027? Yeah.
27, yeah, he signed a 5-year one in 2022.
Ake
And
contract is 26, isn't it?
27.
27 as
27.
well.
I
And
thought it was
Stones is
26,
26.
but Stones is 26. So
Okay,
Stones
so
is obviously not getting a contract extension. So this time next year, Stones, if it's not this summer, he's gone. I know,
we're doing
it's
the
sad.
same conversation a year from now about, aren't we? About, well, obviously we can't really get rid of Akanji and Ake because they've got a contract, and Juma Bar and Vitor Reis are on loan again. It's happening again, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
this
guys,
is
I'm
my
going to clip this
was
video
literally
up next year, and I'm going to just change the names of AI, and we're doing the same video again in a year from now. Fucking 31st of July, 2026. The same video's coming back.
Exactly. And that was my argument about not just signing a right back for the sake of it, because 4 years down the line, if you go out and get a stopgap, you're stuck with them basically. But anyway, yeah, I think these rebuilds do take time. That's the reality of it. We've all played FIFA, we've all played Football Manager, where you do have that full control and you can, bring 12 players in and you can get rid of 15 in one summer, whatever it might be. But at the highest level, the big contracts, unfortunately, it's not that easy. Echeverri's a different one. I've always, just in the back of my mind, I've always had a little bit of a tinge of doubt about the motive surrounding him. And that, to me, feels like more chance of a sell. Who knows? Personally, I'd rather he went to Roma, both from a selfish point of view, because I tend to watch more Serie A, but I also think that's probably a higher level. They'll be playing in Europe next season.
Is there a place for him there? I don't know much about Roma's squad.
I reckon
now.
so. I think they've still got Dybala. They've just signed Evan Ferguson. I mean, that could be fun. Yeah, defo. And it just feels like, for me anyway, that would be a more test. That'd be a bigger challenge. And I can understand. I think it's reported that his camp is pushing for Roma, and I think if he goes out there and he shines for Roma, that's, in my eyes, more of a statement than going out and having a good season for Girona, because it's unlikely Girona get back to where they were a couple of seasons ago, where they're pushing for Champions League. Their ceiling is probably Europa League, Conference League at a push. So I think, personally, if I'm to choose, I'd say Roma for Echeverri. But even still, I think it'd take a big season for him, mainly because, as well, you think about that attacking midfield position, you've got to have a baller, basically. That you can possibly get away with more of a squad player if Vitor Reis came back and he was fourth choice centre half for a couple of seasons or whatever. If you're competing with the likes of Phil Foden, Ryan Cherki, possibly City go out and sign another player next summer in that position. That's more cutthroat. So less optimistic about Echeverri, but I'd bet a lot of my £1,000,000 if I had it on Vitor Reis sticking around, at least after his loan spell.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think Vitor Reis is planned to. I think once again we go back to Vanna, because I think ultimately he's planning the squad, and I think a year from now as well, Guardiola is not going to have much weight on decisions with transfers. He obviously does, but he's gone a year after that, So I think on the Echeverri thing as well, I think it's always worth pointing out like he was signed in January, January 2025, but it was agreed before then, wasn't it? It was agreed. Wasn't it agreed in 2024? A long time
It's been a while
ago.
Yeah, I remember, because
it was. No, it says there you go, January 2024. So it was agreed a year and a half ago, that transfer, when he was like, that's mad. So it's one of those things where he stayed on loan for an entire season. They had no idea what the squad's going to be at that point. You forget, they don't know who Foden's going to be playing. Foden at that point was just off the back of Player of the Year as a number 10.
Kevin De Bruyne, in the midst of it, wasn't he?
In the midst of it, yeah, sorry.
And
then, they're not as much as you plan for De Bruyne, you don't know if he's going to be here. You don't know what's going to go on. At this point, we've won multiple leagues in a row, and it's just so much has happened at this point. I guess the point I'm making is that ultimately you can plan your best plan, but you don't really know until a year and a half later you're making decisions on his future. They've gone, well, this guy's really good, but we've just signed Cherki because we can't lean on Echeverri when you've got De Bruyne's gone. Obviously, you don't know who you're going to sign, so it's just it's just difficult. It's complicated. That's also someone else saying, well, if you're ruthless, just get rid of the contracts. We got PSR, we got just rip up the contracts of all these players and pay God knows how much, and rip up the contracts of the homegrown players, and then thrash around trying to sign 2 or 3 more homegrown players as well. It's just it's easy to say these statements, but you have to back them up with logic and sound. It's we just can't just rip up contracts of homegrown players. For one, piss off all these legends of the club, cost loads of money. As AJ
I think
said, there's no
150
PSR.
grand a week. I don't know. I'm not a sort of an employment lawyer, so this is obviously face value, but that's looking at £8 million to just give them the wages, to pay them off for a year. That's just never happening, is it?
And they're probably on more than that. Stones
Yeah,
might be on 200 grand a week, which is an extra
yeah.
33% on top of that. So yeah, it's a lot of money. And once again, there's also the moral issue. There's all the moral, as in the decency issue. These are players that you love and adore. There's also, like the thing is, we can say you can do that, but like the thing is, City's success has been built on a lot of decency and a lot of trust. Like there's always issues with every approach, but the fact that City treat players like adults, I think, is one of the biggest credits that the club do. This is why you get this intense loyalty. This is why you don't get factions within, and cliques within the camp. This is, in general, it's swallow your pride and pay part of the wages of the players. The players don't want to go, mate. That's the thing. Is you can pay the wages, but they go, I'm all right, mate. So unless a team comes in and signs them, you can't sack players who've done nothing wrong. Like essentially, once again, you've made the mess. You're just gonna have to play in it, and there's an element of accepting that at some point, if that's the bed that you've made, lie in it. And too many crap metaphors from here, but the point I'm making is like there isn't always a solution. There isn't always a solution. And I think we presume there is. So there we go. Clutch Clips just put in the chat. Breaking. Let me just double check if that's actually right. The second of that's an old one.
I think that's from an hour ago, I believe.
Okay, so from Serrano.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the loan game is frustrating. I hope, Amos, and I don't know if you feel the same, but I do hope these signings, this feels different. I don't know. Maybe I think it's because we're on the cusp of a change, and for the first time ever with these loans, I can actually see how these could unfold in terms of a pathway. I can actually see Juma Bar and Vitor Reis getting a look in because there's 3 centre backs about to leave inside the next year or two. Yeah. I can actually see Sver House of Naipan, presuming the loans go well, actually get looking because Kovacic and Bernardo Silva won't be here in a year or two, and I can see routes for these if they're as good as they say they are. And ultimately, I know loans are hard to do, but there's an element of it's on them, for fuck's sake, to an extent. If they're as good as they say we are, like if Echeverri is as good as everyone says he is, if Echeverri is better than Mastroianni, as someone was saying he was in the chat earlier, then he's going to go to Girona and be the best young player in the league, surely. You know what I mean? Like, if he's the future of Argentinian football, he's going to be fine at Girona, right? He's going to be fine at Roma. I know it's not that simple, but that is the presumption. If they're as good as you say, so then what's the issue? You'll go to Roma, you'll score 15 goals, get 10 assists, and be the young player of Serie A. And at that point, he's 100% coming back, right? Is that a fair presumption? I know it's not that simple, but or otherwise,
I hate to bring his name to these lovely this lovely land, but David Beckham always said that his loan spell at Preston sort of made him. It was the old school way of doing it, and I know football has moved on so much, but
he was
in
good
that
money,
time,
so.
exactly. You go out there, you make a statement, you almost force the manager's hand, you force the club's hand, and more often than not for City, the loans have gone well and they've sold them, and that's fine.
Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but there does seem to be something in the water with Echeverri and Vitor Reis. Like they do seem to be pretty mature, hard-working, talented, but they always are. But they seem to have a bit of something about them, And I think there is a special feel to them, and I do feel like they will be the kind of players who take their loan by the scruff of the neck. And special players play for Manchester City Football Club. I know some who are pretty average, but largely special players make it Manchester City Football Club. What usually happens is we moan about these players going on loan. How often does it come back to bite us? That's what we ultimately have to remember. It just doesn't. It just never does. And we're not all moaning. I can't even think of the last bunch of loans, but nothing's coming to mind about loanees that we've got it wrong, and then it's usually the ones we sell, and I think we could be better at activating buyback clauses. But we've just seen that with James Chaffin for what it's worth. So it seems to me that they're already sort of changing that approach whatsoever. And to me, everything suggests that things feel a bit different right now. So, and I know it's frustrating, but I don't know. Craig, thank you so much, by the way. Craig there with a very, very generous super chat saying another 3 months of the phone bill, Steve. Keep it the good pal. Actually, Craig, that's actually true because I'm on Labara, which is £6 a month. So thank you very much. I don't know if you knew that, Craig, but thank you so much for paying my phone bill for 3 months. Very nice of you, mate. Absolute legend. Labara, by the way, would recommend it. Like it's like £6, and I live in the hills, and the signal's good. £6 a month.
This is like a really well-timed ad.
It does. I don't even know Labara even know it exists, but there we go. So I'll put a link in the description.
Commission paid.
I don't know. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, for Labara. I mean, I'm old. I don't use more than 20 gig internet. Everyone else apparently does. So there we go. So
Magic.
Yeah, there we go. Amos, we'll leave it there, mate. I think it's been good fun. I am pushing it on a personal level because I know I've got 2 kids downstairs and one of them's going to wake at some point and the Nick will be stressing trying to get the other sorted. So I'll leave it there, mate. Thank you so much for coming. I've really enjoyed that chat, mate.
Pleasure as always, Steve.
Check out the City Ramble and of course Amos as well. There'll be a link in the description to his socials. The City Ramble are everywhere, aren't they, these days? You're everywhere. You can't get away from just in my face right now. Everywhere, all the time. Open the door, City Ramble are there. Guys, thanks for watching this video. Give the video a like, subscribe. Check out the video this morning about the right back chat. And I did one yesterday where I sort of touched on an ideal 11 that I would love to see played at some point in the upcoming season. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's no right or wrong answer, but I would implore people just to chill a bit. Things aren't that bad, man. We're all right, you know? Bye-bye, guys. See you later.